Welcome back. Today I'm going to show you linear and curve-driven patterns. So what I plan on modeling today is this wire basket I have in my bathroom. So to create all the wires, you could draw each individual wire out. That's totally fine, but it takes a long time, so you might as well use the linear pattern to create the wires in this direction and this direction. And to create each one of these baskets, I used a curve-driven pattern. I just followed this side rail trajectory. So let's get started. So I already sketched this out. I did a simplified version, and if you scroll up this bar here, we can roll back to what I've done. So for the bottom rail, let me hit my touch. I really only needed to draw one, but I wanted to show you different constraints that you can be using instead of mirror. So let's go to normal. So you can see here I use symmetry. So what I basically did was I just drew my geometry. And I think for this part, I probably would have added my fillets here instead of doing it at the upper level, but I kept it kind of boxy for now. So I drew my two squares, and then all I did was I just grabbed this edge, a center line, and this edge, and I just made them symmetric about that center line, so I don't have to dimension the distance between them. And then what else you can do is I want this side to be the same as this side, so I can just make those equal. You don't have to use equal for just the square. And then eventually you'll just have to dimension one of these. And you'll just keep going around using equal and symmetric. So that's just another way when you have geometry in your sketch that you just want to keep related instead of dimensioning everything else. And another thing I did was I extruded in two directions. So I went 2.5 in one direction, and then you can see I went 4.5 in the other direction. So once you start getting more proficient, you'll just start exploring all these other options. Let's turn this sketch on. So next, I made the side. Now if you're going to keep it boxy, you could have drawn it as an extrude over here. But if you're going to round it, like I suggest if you want these edges rounded, I would probably add fillets in my sketch. You would have to use a sweep. So what I did was, I didn't want to calculate the angle that third basket is to the first one, so I know where in space the first one, the center point is, and then the center point for the second one. So I just drew a line between those points. I drew construction geometry here, but you could just use 2 points and draw a line between it instead of trying to calculate out an angle. And I drew that sweep on the side of the rail here. And then my cross section, I just drew it tangent to that. Let's open that up. So here too, I use symmetry again. You can see here, I made a construction line based off, I just converted that geometry and I just made a construction. And I drew a square, and I just made sure they were both symmetric to this line here. And just make sure that your edges you get the collinear constraint to the edges of our bottom rail here. If it doesn't automatically pop up, you can just do that after the fact. Then I created my sweep, and then I mirrored it to the other side. Now for mirror, if you watched my last video, you need to think it out just a little bit sometimes or it's going to fail on you. So I mirrored a body, it's going to default to feature. And then I created some planes. Let me turn that on so you can see it. So I needed to create a plane first for that top wire, for that trajectory, and then I also need to create one sort of at the center here now for the cross section of that sweep. And how I created those planes actually is I left behind some reference geometry. Let me make sure that trajectory is on. So my other sketch, I knew where I wanted to be at, so I left a point there. So I have this plane here, plane 2 and plane 3, intersecting that point. So instead of using a dimension to know how high up I wanted to go or how far over, I just left that point in my other sketch. So this top wire is pretty easy too. The trajectory, I just did on plane 2. And let's go into that. You know, I just drew something that sort of looked like my wire basket. And for the sweep, you know, I drew it, I imagined my cross section is going to be tangent to my profile, but I could have drawn it offset and had it in the center there. You have a lot of options. It's personal preference again. But for the sketch, that'll be a little more important. Because if I'm going to 3D print this, I want everything to be touching. So let's go to that. So just make sure you have a tangent constraint. I want this circle to be tangent to the edge. Because if it's not, if you have a micro gap or something, it's just not going to be touching. But just make sure you add a tangent constraint from my cross section to the side here. Next, I do one of the wires. I simplified it. It's more at an angle, my basket. So it's the same thing again. You're just going to draw out your trajectory, and I left the trajectory tangent to this edge. You could have had it go offset at the center and then your cross section in the center. But again, your cross section, you want it tangent so you know it's touching this part here. And then now we're finally getting into our linear pattern. So pattern, you're going to have options like mirror. You're going to be able to pattern features. You're going to be able to pattern bodies. So when you get into it, make sure you're selecting the right entity, or if it's going to fail on you. And I had it, since I do in the center, I had to pattern it both directions. So you just pick the direction you want to go. So I just picked an edge, and then I typed the instances I want and the spacing, and then I did the same thing in the other direction. And you know, you can go through all these. You can skip some instances if I just didn't want one wire here. And next, I don't know what I was thinking, but I made a plane 4, and I didn't need to do that. I already had a plane 2, so I'll show you what to do if that happens to you. But sometimes you don't have your planes on, you'll just create things that you don't need to. So it was my sketch here. I drew on plane 4, and let's say I don't want plane 4 anymore, I can switch the plane I drew on. So if I hit edit sketch plane, now it's 4, and I can change this plane to. It'll auto update, and now I can get rid of this plane I created for no reason. When I delete it, it always gives you a warning of all your dependent items. So let's say I had other things referencing that, it would warn you, so then you can hit no and just go back and make sure you clean up those relations. And I'm going to get rid of that, I'm good to go. Same thing, wire 2 is just the wire coming off the side here. I drew that same trajectory and cross-section, made sure it's tangent. I made another linear pattern. And then for this one, let's just go into it. You can see the edges I picked. All I'm doing is I just picked, because I wanted to go in this line here, you just pick an edge going in that direction. If you don't have that, you're going to have to create that reference geometry somewhere so that the pattern knows which way to go. But for linear pattern, you can only go in a straight line depending how it's oriented in X, Y, or Z. And then linear patterns up here. There's also, if you bring it down, you'll see circular pattern, curve-driven, so we're going to be doing next to create the other baskets. Now, curve-driven is just anything that's not circular or linear. So if you're just drawing something on a trajectory, if it's a curve, you'd be using that. And sketch-driven is if you sketch out ahead of time, you leave points on where you want your pattern to follow. I don't really use that one that often. I don't use table or fill either. I use mostly linear, circular, mirror, and curve-driven. So now, we're going down to curve-driven patterns. So all I did, let me open this up, was I just picked everything. Now we're almost at that point where we're thinking, God, maybe I should do an assembly, but this is still kind of easy enough to hash out as a part. So I picked all my bodies, I just picked every single wire here, and then I picked, from my curve, I went back to my trajectory here, I just picked this line, and I just picked how many I wanted, and the spacing, and that's pretty much it. And that's it for this basket. Let me just take off the plane. Really easy to create. Patterns are really powerful. When you don't want to draw the same thing over and over again, it's really helpful to know how to use these. When you're getting started and if something's failing a lot and you can't figure it out, just totally draw it out just to get it done with. But the more experience you get, the more you'll learn the software, and then the more features you'll be able to take advantage of. So I'll see you in my next video.